we have to be willing to have those uncomfortable conversations.
You know, this is central to any struggle for progress.
For this episode, Ruha Benjamin goes one-on-one with Jackson Mayor Chokwe Lumumba. Together, they take a deep dive on the state of race. Today's topic is, Bill Clinton recently said, quote, "We only have one remaining bigotry. We don't want to be around anybody who disagrees with us." Do you agree with that statement? And do you think the frequent assertion that we are in a post-racial culture is true or false?
So I'll pick up on the first part of that question, that the one remaining bigotry is that we don't want to be around people who disagree with us. I think that in many ways that's a oversimplification and a flattening of the social reality that we live with. I think it reduces the tensions and the conflicts to the context of kind of partisan divisions, and it's a kind of call for civil discourse and listening and understanding, all of which on one level sounds good. But the way in which it's flattened social reality, I think, is that people are not simply in disagreement. So it's as if we would say people living under the boot of Jim Crow laws disagreed with those who benefited from those laws, or the enslaved disagreed with those who benefited from chattel slavery. And so it's much more than disagreement. And in many ways, the oppressed have always and continue to have to live amongst those who not only disagree, but believe in their inferiority, right? And so this idea that we're all kind of equal players in this land, you have your views, I have mine, and the solution is just that we listen and exchange and be open, flattens the power hierarchies, the status hierarchies, that makes it so your views of me are not simply individualized, but are institutionalized. Yeah. So your bias against me is not simply one-to-one, but become codified in our laws and policies. And I have to live with that no matter if I'm willing to listen to you, right? And so in that way, I feel like that Clintonian statement it's coming from a particular angle. Implicit in it is a call for kind of civil discourse and listening across partisan lines, let's say. But in some ways, that's very secondary to this idea that I shouldn't have to live with your views of my inferiority or listen to them. Yeah. Right? And so I think that to me is first, and then we can get to the secondary disagreements that we might have.
I would agree that the issues that we suffer from are far more expansive, far more complicated, and far broader than the simplicity in that statement. I would agree that we live in a culture where we don't invite disagreement, and so we need to have these honest conversations. But it's much broader than that. If I look at the issue of racism and how it is institutionalized, what we presently do, the common mistake that we make, is that we take prejudice as a synonym for racism. That's right. Everyone has a prejudice. Some people like short people more than they like tall people. Yeah. Some people like ketchup more than they like mustard. Yeah. But it is the fact that you could have these biases and implement a system which oppresses. Yeah. When we talk about things like criminal justice reform, and we simplify it to just solving the issue of crime, and we don't take it to a higher plane and recognize how much our country profits and invests in the issue of crime. There is a very, very solid economy that if crime stopped tomorrow, we often make the statement that crime doesn't pay. Yeah. If crime stopped tomorrow, our country would fail. Yeah. Because you have to consider the lawyers that are paid by crime, the judges, the police, and we live in a society where we have more police today than we've ever had. Yeah. You have your city police, your county police, your state police, your federal police, your secret police who watch the secret police, and that doesn't even get into the prison system and guards and parole and all of these people who are dependent on an over-incarceration. Right. An over-incarceration of our society. And we don't address the issues that affect all of us.
Yeah.
Because we believe or buy into the notion that that makes us safer. And so that requires conflict in communities, communities that often resemble African American demographics. And so the way that that affects people, no matter whether you're African American or not, is that it makes you no more safe. We have more police than any other country in the world. We have more people incarcerated than any other country in the world. Yet we have more crime than any other country in the world. And so that inability to confront the disagreement that people may have leaves us all in a less safe place.
Yeah. And one of the points that has come up in both sets of comments is this idea that people do profit off of these inequitable systems. So we often frame it as if we all agree that it's not serving us, but in very tangible ways it is serving some people. And so there's an investment in maintaining this system on the part of very powerful individuals. And when it comes to incarceration in particular, there's a growing consciousness around this idea that people are paying, taxpayers are paying, and it's not working. And so what we're finding is the very same companies that have been invested in this kind of old school kind of incarceration are recreating themselves and are getting in the business of, say, ankle monitors and electronic surveillance and using apps in order to do all of this. And so they're sort of investing in technologies that are making the prison everyday life, right? And so we have to pay attention to how racism evolves. And so one of the challenges in conversations is we want to know the history, but we want to understand how it morphs over time as well. And when we only use past forms of racism as our measure of whether we still have the problem or not, we lose sight of its transformation, that racism can also be innovative. And so those who are anti-racist have to be one step ahead, right, and think about how it's evolving. And I think that's one of the tasks of people who really care about this problem is that we want to know the historical genealogy, but we also in some ways want to be futurists as well and think about how, you know, it sounds good. Oh, ankle monitors, right? Or, you know, an app that will keep track of you after on parole. But how in many ways this creates a web of incarceration in entire communities in a way that is not confined to a cell. And so this is part of going beyond, I think, simply the framing of disagreement and to think about, in some ways, we are dealing with entrenched conflicts that we need to be able to give voice to.
It takes on, it's the difference between understanding the difference between a battle and a war. In the midst of a war, there are different tactics that are employed in any given battle. So that war, that struggle continues. And so as we look at certain things, this notion of a post-racial society is a complete fallacy.
We're in a post-racial society. I hope we're post that now.
And truthfully, if we follow history, we see that any seminal progress is followed by an effort to bring that back. And so, you know, we look at a time in 2018 where we have had the first black president. But I caution people into not taking that seminal victory, which is very important. When I think of the history and the experience of my grandmother, who showed the picture of Emmett Till to my father and his siblings, that is a moment that has great meaning and great impact on their lives. But we cannot allow that seminal victory to be mistaken as an overall change in our culture, an overall change in what we're suffering from. You know, I've often used the analogy of Barack Obama's presidency to that of the plantation. I talked about the plantation and I talked about the overseer. And that overseer was the person who managed the plantation. And the overseer had the responsibility of making certain that the slaves brought in as much of the crop as they could. Now, sometimes that overseer was white. Sometimes over time that overseer became black. If the overseer was black, maybe he didn't beat you quite as bad. Maybe he beat you worse. The reality is that our problem was never with the overseer. Our problem was with the plantation itself. And so when we see institutional vestiges that support conditions
Yes.
that lead to a racialized society and how it profits off of those. We have to dare to tackle those institutions and how
Yes.
they impact us overall.
Totally agree. In fact, I was at the Mississippi Civil Rights Museum this morning, and you see this whole wall of black politicians in the late 1800s. Now, we wouldn't point to them and say, look at them, things must have been great for black people, right?
Yeah.
In hindsight, we know that a few token examples of progress beyond what would be expected cannot be a measure for how the people in general are doing. But yet we do that in our contemporary
Absolutely.
lives with hold-up examples, whether it's in politics or entertainment or education. And what we need to do is look at the larger pattern and the larger experience as opposed to just a few cases. And so this is part of reading the reality that we're living in with greater accuracy.